That money was for my in-laws' penthouse. His voice cracks on the word penthouse, sharp and high, and for a second I don't recognize it as my son's. It bounces off my old living room walls, the same walls that once heard his baby laughter, and suddenly I am not his mother. I am an accused thief standing in her own house. I am in the doorway, my hands still on the frame. My fingers smell faintly of detergent from folding his children's tiny t-shirts and socks. My apron is still tied around my waist. I hadn't even untied it before he started shouting. He stands in the middle of the room, cheeks flushed and angry red, eyes bulging, looking at me like I'm something he scraped off his shoe. In my handbag, hanging heavy from my shoulder, the papers from the sale of this house are still warm from the lawyer's printer. They rustle quietly when I shift my weight, tucked between my reading glasses and an old handkerchief with his initials clumsily stitched in blue. He was 12 when he gave me that, so proud of his crooked letters. I used to cry from joy when I looked at it. Now it just presses against the documents, like a reminder of a boy I lost long before today. My knees ache from standing all morning at the lawyer's office, from climbing the steps, from sitting too long in those hard chairs. But I don't complain. I never do. I just stand there and watch his wife on the sofa. She's leaning back, one leg crossed over the other, her eyebrows raised just so, her phone in her hand as if she's half expecting to record some entertainment. To her, this is drama. To me, it's my life being dragged across the floor. Behind them, the television is on mute. On the screen, a glossy advertisement plays. Wide, glass windows, ocean bleeding into sky, a rooftop pool glinting in the sun. A luxury penthouse. Of course, the irony lands like a stone in my stomach. On the coffee table, my grandson's cartoon is paused, his toys scattered on the floor. One little plastic truck bumps against my foot as I shift, trying to steady myself. My son steps closer. The smell of his aftershave hits me, the same brand his father once used, and for a moment my chest tightens. But then he points his finger in my face, eyes burning. You've ruined everything. Do you understand that? You've sabotaged our future. You have any idea what you've done? Ours, I think. Whose ours? But I don't say it yet. I just feel my heart starting to pound, not from fear. Fear is familiar. This is older, heavier, an old disappointment waking up again. It feels like the first time he shouted at me as a teenager, slammed the door, and I stood outside pretending I hadn't heard. His wife finally speaks, her voice soft, smooth, the way people talk before they sign you out of their lives. "Mom," she says, and the word doesn't sit right in her mouth. "You should have consulted us first. That house was an asset for the family." For the family. She means hers. I hear the missing word even if she doesn't say it. From the hallway, a small voice cuts through the tension. "Daddy, why are you angry at Grandma?" My grandson, hair sticking up, clutching a toy dinosaur, looks between us with wide, confused eyes. "Go to your room," my son snaps, not even glancing at him. The boy flinches. His eyes land on me for a second. Just a second, and I see confusion and hurt and fear all mixed together. I swallow the sting rising in my throat and force my lips into something that might look like a reassuring smile. He shuffles away, his little feet dragging along the floorboards I once polished on my hands and knees. My son turns back to me like a storm circling. "You're selfish," he says, each word a blow. "You think only about yourself. You don't understand modern financial planning. You don't understand value. You just act on emotions." Modern financial planning, value. He throws those phrases at me like they're weapons, like they prove I am smaller, simpler. Each one is another nail in the coffin of the woman I used to be to him, the one he once hugged and whispered secrets to.
He paces, running a hand through his hair. "We had a plan," he says. "You knew we were going to sell the house properly, quietly. We were going to redirect the funds to help my in-laws secure the penthouse, so everyone can live in comfort. Then later," he waves a hand in the air dismissively, "later we'd figure out your living situation." There it is, out loud. Their future, their comfort, my later. In that instant, something sharp and cold lodges in my chest. I hear his words, but I also hear everything underneath them. I was never part of that comfort. I was a piece of old furniture to be relocated once the new place was ready. A couch, a cupboard, an obligation. My fingers trembled around the strap of my bag. He sees it and mistakes it for guilt. He smirks, leans in close, his voice dropping into a hiss. "You've embarrassed me. Do you know that? I promised them that money. They're waiting. They're counting on it. And you just went behind my back." I see his phone screen light up in his hand. He glances at it briefly, but the TV's black frame reflects it back to me. A message from his father-in-law. "Any update on funds?" The words hang in the air like smoke. Something inside me cools, not shattered, not broken, just frozen solid.
"Mom," he says loudly, speaking as if I am a child in the wrong, "you are too old to manage money. You don't understand what's at stake. Old people shouldn't make big decisions alone." He says this with my grandson still peeking from the hallway, small fingers curled around the edge of the wall. He says it in the house I scrubbed, painted, paid for with my blood and my husband's sleepless nights. The humiliation sinks into my bones, heavy and familiar. It's not just his words today, it's every eye roll, every sigh, every time I let him talk to me like I was in the way because he was stressed. My cheeks burn. I feel like my skin is too tight on my face. I could shout. I could cry. I do neither. Instead, I inhale slowly. Feel the pain in my knees, the weight of my years, and I keep my voice soft, like I'm soothing a frightened child. The house is sold. I've already decided what to do. The money is not going where you planned. The silence that follows is thick, like someone has sucked all the air out of the room. His wife's jaw tightens. My grandson's eyes widen. The ad on the TV flips to a new scene, another rooftop pool, more glossy smiles, but no one is looking at it anymore. For the first time in a very long time, I lift my chin and look straight into my son's eyes. I don't search for the boy I raised. I don't plead. I study the man in front of me like he is a stranger who has just walked into my house uninvited. Inside, behind the trembling hands, behind the aching joints, something small and quiet stands up. A thought, calm and hard as stone. If they think I am weak because I am old, then they have forgotten who built the ground they are standing on. And I realize I am about to remember it for them. I remember sitting at the table under single yellow bulb, sewing tiny name tags into his shirts. I would whisper a small prayer with each stitch. Let his life be softer than ours. Let his feet walk on tiles, not dust. When my husband died, I was 52. The house, finally ours, felt too large overnight. His side of the bed stayed cold. The hallway echoed differently. I would sit in the dark with my hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea and listen to the clock tick. Each second sounded like it was counting my new loneliness. After the funeral, my son put his arm around me. His shoulder was tense, his shirt damp from his own tears. "Don't worry, Mom," he said gently. "I'll take care of you." His words were sweet, but even then, his eyes flicked to his phone every few minutes. Messages, notifications, the world tugging him away. I saw it. I pretended I didn't. I watched him change over the years.
The boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the roadside became a man whose eyes sparkled only when he spoke about promotions, pay raises, stocks. He checked his bank balance more than he checked on me. I told myself it was normal, that it meant he was responsible, that this was what a better life looked like. When I became a grandmother, my world burst back into color. Tiny hands around my neck, soft breath against my cheek. The first time he called me Nanna, I cried in the kitchen and pretended I'd cut onions. I cooked their favorite meals. I sat on the floor and played with toy cars, even when my knees protested, the bones grinding like old hinges. At night, when the house finally quieted, I told my grandson stories about his late grandfather, how he once chased a bus just to hand me my lunchbox, how he saved every extra coin in a jar labeled future. I wanted the boy to know that he came from something strong and stubborn. When my son and his wife asked if they could move in for a little while to save for their future, I agreed before they finished a sentence. The idea of noise in these rooms again, of footsteps and laughter, felt like a gift. I made space in closets, rearranged drawers. I told myself I was lucky. Slowly, my bedroom shrank. A storage box here, a spare cot there. Some of my clothes moved into the old trunk at the foot of the bed. My husband's photo frames were taken down from the living room wall to make space for something modern, my daughter-in-law said. She put up large abstract prints instead. My husband's smile ended up half hidden behind a tall indoor plant in the corner. They talked about things I didn't understand over dinner. Investments, crypto, real estate, leveraging assets. I would be at the sink, my back to them, hands in soapy water, listening. They spoke like the house was a chess piece on a board, not the place where I had buried half my life. It started with small cuts. Your cooking is so old-fashioned, Mom. People don't eat like this anymore.
Don't worry about online banking. You don't get it. Just leave it to us. Please, stop asking about the account. It's complicated. Just trust me. Once I asked my son if he could drive me to visit my sister in the next town. We hadn't seen each other in months. He sighed, eyes still on his laptop. Mom, it's a waste of gas for just old lady gossip. We'll go some other time. I laughed, like it was a funny joke. My heart shrank a little inside my chest. I started hiding my aches. When my hip clicked, I pretended it was nothing. When I felt dizzy, I sat down silently until it passed. I thought, don't be a burden. He has enough stress. I believed that if I stayed small and quiet, love would come back to the center of our home. My finances was simple. One bank account, a small savings. The house title stored in a folder my husband had labeled in his neat handwriting. Before he died, he made me promise with his hand over mine, never let anyone push you out of what we built, all right? I nodded, thinking he was being dramatic. I didn't see the future he worried about. Still, I trusted my son more than I trusted myself. I let him help me set up online banking. I shared my passwords. I showed him where I kept the documents. It's safer if you know everything, I told him, in case something happens to me. I thought I was securing my old age. I didn't realize I was handing him the blueprint to my displacement. The first time his in-laws visited, they walked through my house like appraisers, not guests. His father-in-law tapped walls with his knuckles, opened windows, checked the view. His mother-in-law stood in the center of the living room, turned slowly and said, "This place must be worth a lot now." In the kitchen while I poured tea, I heard her whisper to my daughter-in-law, "A penthouse would be more dignified, with their status. This is fine for now, but..." I felt like wallpaper, old and peeling, waiting to be stripped away. My life as a 60-plus grandmother became a quiet routine of service. Cook, clean, watch the child, give advice only when asked, and smile when it is ignored. It was as if my time, my room, even my house had become communal property that somehow belonged more to them than to me. The first real crack appeared one evening over dinner. We were eating in silence, the clink of cutlery the only sound. My son cleared his throat,
wiped his mouth, and said, casually, Mom, we've been thinking. It's time we properly restructure the ownership of the house for tax reasons. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. The room went quiet except for that small metallic sound as my fork touched the plate. He launched into his professional voice, the one he uses in meetings. If we put the house under a family trust, it benefits everyone, legally and financially. It's just smart planning. He said everyone, but as he spoke, my name seemed to drift further and further away from that word. His wife joined in, nodding. My parents are planning to sell their apartment. They're tired of climbing stairs. A penthouse would be perfect for them, but they need a little extra to bridge the gap. She smiled, like she was sharing a sweet story. If we combine assets, we can make it all work, for the whole family. I watched both of them carefully, the way their eyes slid past me, the slight tightness in my son's jaw when he mentioned combining assets, the lack of any mention of where I would go. You're alone, Mom, my son said gently, in that patronizing tone that pricked my skin. You don't need this much space. We could move you into a smaller flat. Or a seniors facility with better support. They have great activities, you know. My chest hurt. Not like a heart attack, more like a slow bruise. My grandson, sitting beside me, looked up from his plate. Will Grandma have a pool in her new place too? He asked, eyes shining. My son laughed. Grandma doesn't need a pool, she just needs a good chair and a TV. They all laughed. I forced myself to smile, even as something inside me shriveled. When would this restructuring happen? Where would I be during all this? He patted my hand dismissively. First we secure the penthouse, then we'll figure out your situation. Don't worry about it. Days later, I walked past the bedroom and heard my daughter-in-law on the phone. Don't worry, Papa, she said, her voice bright. The funds are practically guaranteed. My husband has it under control. The down payment will be ready. Funds, I thought. Guaranteed. My house reduced to a line item in someone else's promise. Small things began to go missing. Not jewelry, not money, papers. A file I always kept in the third drawer from the top appeared in the second. An envelope that used to be tucked under the mattress was moved to the wardrobe. My husband's old folder with the original purchase documents of the house wasn't exactly where I'd left it. Did you touch my documents? I asked my son one afternoon. He flashed a tight smile. Mom, you're getting forgetful. I organized everything. You should thank me. It was all over the place. I didn't remember it being all over the place, but I remembered my promise to my husband, and my stomach twisted. One evening, I slipped a few notes into my grandson's hand, a bit of pocket money. His face lit up. Before he could run off, my son saw it. Mom, he said sharply, you should be careful with finances at your age. Don't make emotional decisions with money. You're not good at that. The words sliced deeper than I let him see. My entire life had been emotional decisions with money. I worked overtime not for myself, but so he could have new shoes, a better school, a birthday cake with his favorite frosting. Sacrifice had been my currency, and now it was held against me like a flaw. My doctor appointments became my own secret errands. I would book a rideshare, sit quietly in the back seat, clutch my handbag, and go alone. My son was always too busy, and I didn't want to nag. It was easier to be delivered from one place to another like a parcel than to feel like a burden weighing on his schedule. On my birthday, instead of a simple dinner at home, they took me to a fancy restaurant with loud music and uncomfortable chairs. The food came in tiny portions on big plates. They spent more time taking pictures of their meals than talking to me. When the cake arrived, it had a big glittering 60 on it. I'm older than that, I said, half laughing. It looks better in photos, my daughter-in-law replied, waving a hand. As if my real age was something to be edited out, like a blemish. At night, lying in my bed while their muffled laughter floated down the hallway, I heard other sounds too. Soft arguments, frantic whispers. We have to sign before the end of the month. What if the funds are delayed?
Don't worry, we'll get it from Mom's place. She has no use for all that space. My house, my memories, my life, always the center of their calculations. One Sunday while I was folding laundry, I mentioned casually that I'd been thinking about selling the house one day and moving closer to my sister. The air shifted. My son's head snapped up. What? Mom, that's irrational, he said, voice sharp. You're not considering the bigger picture. You can't just decide things like that. The bigger picture in his mind was square footage, city views, and his in-laws finally living in the standard they deserve. My comfort, my loneliness, my grief, those were invisible on his chart. When I tried to speak about missing his father, about how some days I still set an extra plate by mistake, he brushed it away with an impatient flick of his hand. Don't be sentimental, Mom. It's just a building. Don't get attached. I stopped talking after that. Not because I had nothing to say, but because no one was listening. One night, when the house was quiet, I pulled out the old wooden box from the cupboard. It smelled faintly of camphor and age. Inside were letters my husband had written me when he worked overnight shifts. I unfolded one, the paper thin and fragile. In his messy handwriting, he had written, "If anything ever happens to me, don't let anyone sideline you just because you grow old. You are the spine of this family, not the shadow." My hands shook as I pressed the letter to my chest. I closed my eyes and felt his voice in my ear. I had not thought of myself as a spine in a very long time. A few days later, my son left his laptop open on the dining table. He must have assumed I wouldn't touch it. I walked past with a plate in my hand, and the numbers on the screen caught my eye. It was a spreadsheet, a neat grid of plans and projections. At the top, sale of Mum's house. Below it, numbers, dates, expected amounts, breakdown of the penthouse purchase. My eyes scanned the lines, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. And then I saw the last row. Allocate leftover funds for Mum's care home. Care home? Leftover. Not find Mum a place she likes, not ensure Mum is comfortable, just allocate leftover funds. Like scraping the bottom of a pot after serving everyone else. Something inside me broke, but it didn't shatter. It hardened. That spreadsheet burned into my eyes. The words Mum's care home might as well have been written in fire. A footnote. I wasn't part of their dream. I was a problem to be stored after the dream came true. My first instinct was to cry. Big, messy tears over the keyboard, but the tears rose and stopped at the edge of my lashes. They refused to fall. Instead, a cold, steady anger settled into my bones, heavier than any grief I'd carried since my husband's funeral. I closed the laptop gently, as if I were putting a child to sleep, and walked to the kitchen. I sat at the table with a cup of tea. I don't remember making it. It just ended up in my hands, steam curling up into my lined face. The tea went cold untouched as I stared at the wall and heard my husband in my head. "You are not fragile porcelain," his voice said from memory. "You are the clay we built this life from." Clay cracks, yes, but it also hardens in fire. I stood up, my chair scraping softly, and went to my bedroom. My knees complained, but I ignored them. I knelt down beside the bed and reached underneath, fingers searching for the old metal box my son didn't know about or had forgotten. It was still there, dusty, stubborn. I dragged it out and opened it. Inside were the pieces of my identity, my birth certificate, our marriage certificate, yellowed copies of the house deed. At the bottom, folded in half, was a document I hadn't looked at in years. A life insurance policy, taken out by my husband. Payable only to me. As I read through it, the meaning sank in. My husband had not been a man of many words, but this was his handwriting in a different form. A quiet preparation, a safety net, as if somewhere deep down he had known our love for our child might not be repaid with the same kind of love. He had trusted my strength more than he had trusted our son's character.
That realization hurt, but it also gave me something I hadn't had in a long time, a sense of power. Not the loud kind, the rooted kind. My phone rang that evening. I almost didn't answer, lost in thought, but the name on the screen made me pick up. My younger sister. Her voice was firm, no small talk. "Why did I hear from our cousins that you're being pushed into a care home?" she demanded. The words knocked the breath from my lungs. I hadn't told her. I hadn't told anyone. I thought my humiliation was invisible, tucked neatly behind my smiles. But pain leaks. Neighbors talk. People notice scraps of conversation, sighs in the hallway, a hunched back at the bus stop. I swallowed. "Who told you that?" I asked, my voice thin. "Doesn't matter. Is it true?"
I held the phone to my ear with one hand and gripped the edge of the table with the other. The dam I'd built inside me began to crack. In a halting whisper, I poured it all out. The penthouse plan, the family trust, the jokes about care homes, the spreadsheet, the word leftover, the way my son talked down to me like I was losing my mind instead of losing my patience. My sister listened. There was a heavy silence on the line. I could hear her breathing, controlled and slow. When she finally spoke, her voice was the same one she used when we were children, and she stood between me and the neighborhood bullies. "You are not a guest in your own story," she said. "You're the owner." The words shot through me like a spark. She reminded me of what our parents taught us, that if your name is on a paper, it means something, that you don't sign anything you don't understand, that age does not erase rights. "Your name is on that deed, isn't it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Alone?" "Yes." "Then listen to me," she said. "You need a lawyer, not the one your son knows, a neutral one. Someone who will talk to you like a person, not a problem. Promise me you'll go." I hesitated. I thought of my son's anger, my daughter-in-law's tight smile, the roof over my head, the boy down the hall who called me Nana. But then I thought of the word leftover. "I'll go," I whispered. The next day, while my son and his wife were at work and my grandson was at school, my sister came to get me. We rode the bus together, two aging women with sensible shoes and stubborn hearts. She held my arm firmly as we climbed the stairs to a modest law office above a stationery shop. Inside, the air smelled of paper and ink. A young woman in a simple blouse greeted us. She couldn't have been older than my daughter-in-law. Her eyes, though, were softer. When she realized I was there for advice, she came around the desk and pulled out a chair for me herself. I sat down and laid everything on the table. The spreadsheet printed from my son's laptop, the casual suggestions, the family trust, the jokes about my age, the inferred promise, never spoken plainly, but always hanging there, that my house was simply a means to their penthouse. She listened, occasionally writing notes. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, my hands were trembling. She folded her hands. "All right," she said gently. "Let me explain what the law says." And then she did, point by point, slowly, clearly. She told me that since my name alone was on the deed, the house was mine, not my son's, not his in-laws, mine. She told me that I was under no obligation to fund anyone's lifestyle, not even my child's, while I was alive. She explained that I could sell or keep the house as I wished, move where I liked, and allocate the money however I chose. With each sentence, it was like someone was turning on lights in rooms inside me that had been dark for years. We talked about options. Selling my house on my terms if I wanted to. Moving closer to my sister. Using the money to secure a small place for myself where I would not be a guest. She suggested something I hadn't thought of. Setting aside money directly for my grandson in a way his parents couldn't touch. We spoke about protecting myself if the pressure continued. She told me that what my son was doing, if he kept insisting, if he tried to control my assets, could be considered financial abuse of an elder. The words sounded harsh, but they were true. A plan took shape on the paper between us. I would quietly engage a separate real estate agent. I would sell the house myself, without my son's involvement. I would find a modest, safe apartment near my sister. I would open a new bank account with only my name. I would list my sister as my emergency contact, not my son. And I would document everything. Are you sure you want to do this? The lawyer asked softly. It may change your relationship. I thought about the spreadsheet, the line about the care home, the word leftover. My relationship already changed, I said. I'm just catching up. She nodded. As my sister and I stepped back onto the street, the city air hit my face. It smelled like exhaust and fried food and people. For the first time in a long while, I felt the noise of life around me, not as something that rushed past, but as something I was still part of. Inside me, the older, quieter version of myself, the one who had swallowed every insult and excused every disrespect, finally sat down. Another version stood up, the one my husband had seen when he called me the spine of the family. She was late, but she was here. When the sale of my house finally went through, my son had no idea. I met with my agent in quiet offices, signed papers carefully, read every line twice. My hand didn't shake over my signature, not anymore. My heart still pounded, but with clarity, not fear. I chose a small, sunny apartment near my sister's building. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't have ocean views or rooftop pools. It had an elevator that worked, a railing on the balcony where I could hang my herbs, and enough space for a spare mattress if my grandson ever wanted to sleep over. That was enough for me. At the bank, I opened a new account. The clerk looked at my ID and smiled politely. "Is anyone else going to be on this account with you?" he asked. "No," I said, "just me." The house sale proceeds moved into that account digit by digit, number by number. I watched the total appear on the screen, the value of decades of work. I felt no urge to brag about it. I felt only the weight of responsibility, finally in my own hands again. From that amount, I set aside a portion for something my husband would have approved of, a trust fund for our grandson. Nothing extravagant, enough to help with his education, his first home, something that mattered. I structured it carefully, with the lawyer's help, in such a way that his parents could not dip into it for penthouses or luxuries. I also set aside a little for another purpose, a pre-booked appointment with a lawyer that my son didn't know about. Not for paperwork this time, for a confrontation, with witnesses, with facts. I waited. When everything was ready, I called my son. "Can you and your wife come over on Sunday?" I asked. "I have big news about the house, about our future." He sounded excited for the first time in weeks. "Finally," he said, "I told them it would all work out." On Sunday, I made tea the way I always had, strong, with just enough milk. Habit wrapped around each movement. I set out cups on the same old table, now bare, pictures already packed into boxes. The sunlight slanted through the window in familiar patterns. They arrived buzzing. My daughter-in-law was already talking about furniture. "We found this beautiful sectional that would look amazing in the penthouse." She shrugged off her handbag. "Neutral tones, very classy, and the view, oh, Mom, you're going to love visiting." Visiting. In the place they thought they'd pay for with my home. I let their voices fill the room for a moment, watched my son's animated hands drawing imaginary layouts in the air. I let their fantasies stretch and swell, like a balloon someone kept blowing air into. Then I reached into my bag and placed a neat folder on the table. "Sit," I said quietly. They did, curiosity flickering across their faces. "The house has been sold. Not by you, by me. The money's in my account. It will be used for my living, and a portion has been set aside for your son's future. The rest is not available for any penthouse." My son's face drained of color, then flushed a dark red. My daughter-in-law's smile froze, her teacup hovering midway to her mouth. For a heartbeat, there was only the sound of the ticking wall clock. Then it happened. He shot to his feet, chair scraping violently against the floor. "That money was for my in-laws' penthouse," he screamed. The same line that started this. His voice boomed so loudly that I saw a shadow pause at the neighbor's window outside. In the hallway, my grandson dropped his toy. It clattered to the floor. He came running to my side, wide-eyed, clutching my arm. I felt his fingers dig into my skin. I put my hand over his gently. Once, that kind of anger would have made me shrink, apologize, doubt myself. This time, I stayed seated. I straightened my back, felt my spine, the one my husband had named, hold firm. "The money," I said calmly, "belongs to the person who bled for it. That would be me." He stared at me like I had slapped him. "You don't know what you're doing," he spat. "This is confusion. You're being manipulated. I'll get legal advice. You can't just ignore what we planned. We trusted you." I slid a small card across the cable with 2 fingers. "I have already taken legal advice," I said. "Everything I've done is lawful and documented." He stopped. "What?" he whispered. I opened the folder and showed him the copies. The sale agreement, the new account documents, the trust fund papers. I spoke slowly, repeating the lawyer's words. "My name was on the deed," I said. "I had the right to sell. I am under no obligation to fund anyone's lifestyle. What you and your in-laws expected from me without asking is called financial exploitation of an elder." I used that exact phrase. I watched it land. His eyes flickered, scanning the papers, looking for a loophole. His wife leaned forward, trying to salvage control. "Maybe we can reconsider some allocations," she said quickly. "We're all family. Surely there's a way to help my parents. They've already given notice on their place." "Not with my home," I cut in, my voice steady. "Never again." I looked at both of them. I have documented everything. The pressure, the assumptions, the spreadsheet you left open with leftover funds for Mom's care home. If you continue to push, if you harass me about this money, I will report it as elder financial abuse. The word abuse hung in the air like a crack of thunder. My son's mouth twisted. "So you're choosing outsiders over your own son?" he asked, voice trembling with rage. "Anyone who sees me as a walking wallet," I said quietly, "is not behaving like family. Blood alone doesn't give you the right to dismantle my life." I turned to my grandson, still holding my arm. His little chest rose and fell quickly. I softened my tone. "Listen to me, sweetheart. Grandma will always make sure you're safe, even if you don't understand now." It was a simple sentence, but my son heard the message beneath it. I was cutting off the path through which his greed had hoped to travel. I was choosing to take care of the next generation directly, without going through him. I explained the trust fund out loud. "There is money set aside in your name," I told my grandson. "For your studies, for your future. Only for you. No one can use it for anything else." My son's eyes widened, a new kind of panic creeping in. The penthouse, the down payment, the promises to his in-laws, they were all evaporating in front of him. He lashed out with words instead. "You're selfish, old, manipulative, after everything I've done for you." But his insults slid off like rain on stone. I knew who I was, and now I knew the law stood beside me. I stood up slowly, my palms flat on the table, feeling its familiar surface one last time. "This is the last time we will speak about my finances," I said.
You are no longer welcome to manage, suggest, or plan anything related to my house or my money. That era is over." I looked at him, really looked at him. My son, my boy, the man who had turned my sacrifices into expectations. My heart hurt, but my resolve did not waver. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in a long time, he seemed at a loss for words. It wasn't a dramatic exit, no door slams, no shattered glass, just a quiet ending of a chapter that had stretched too long. The days after the showdown were silent, in a different way. It felt like the air after a storm when you step outside and look around to see what has fallen and what still stands. Some branches were broken, some leaves were gone, but the tree was still rooted. My son stopped calling as often. Sometimes my phone would light up with his name and my stomach would twist with that old guilt. I would hover over the green button, my thumb itching to press it, but then I would see that spreadsheet in my mind, that line about the care home, the word leftover. I would put the phone down and let it ring out. My sister filled the spaces he left. She came over with containers of food, her laughter booming in my small new kitchen. We sat on my new sofa and told old stories, the ones from before I ever became mom. She reminded me that I had a life before my child, that I was a whole person long before I became someone's mother or someone's grandmother. We moved my belongings into the new apartment slowly, with care. My husband's photograph was the first thing I placed, not behind a plant, not in some dark corner, on a shelf at eye level, where his smile could greet me every morning. I put our old teapot on the stove, its handle chipped from years of use. I set my spice jars in a neat row. Each item felt like a blessing to the space, a way of telling the walls, we have lived, we are still living. That first night in my new bed, I lay down and listened. No footsteps in the hall, no muffled arguments about loans and down payments, just the distant hum of the city. Cars, voices, life moving outside my window. For the first time in years, I felt safe in a way that didn't depend on someone else's mood or plan. As we drank weak tea from paper cups, I heard their versions of my pain. My son took my pension for investment and never returned it. My daughter says I should sell and move near her in another city, but only if I help with their mortgage. My children treat my house like their backup plan. I'm just here, waiting to be moved. In their eyes, I saw my own fear and my own strength reflected back. We exchanged recipes, yes, but we also exchanged lawyer numbers, pamphlets on rights, quiet encouragement. I visited the lawyer again and finalized my will and financial plan. We made sure my grandson's trust fund was airtight, tied to his needs, not his parents' desires. I smiled, imagining him one day opening a letter from a grandmother who refused to let her love be filtered through greed. At night, I kept a small journal by my bed. I wrote down memories. The first time my son walked, the way my husband used to fall asleep in front of the TV with his mouth open, the day I saw the spreadsheet, the feeling in my chest when I signed the sale papers. I wrote it because I realized my story did not end when my son's respect did. It just turned a new page. My grandson visited when he was allowed. Sometimes it was awkward, brief visits under his father's watchful eye. Sometimes he came alone for a few hours. He would run around my smaller living room and say, "Nana, your house feels cozy." I would laugh and blink away the prick of tears.
I never spoke badly about his parents to him. That's not a burden for small shoulders. Instead, I told him stories about choices, about boundaries, about the difference between asking for help and treating someone's sacrifices like a right. One afternoon, my son came to see me alone. He sat on my modest sofa, his back straight, his eyes drifting around my little living room. It was smaller than the old house, but it was entirely mine. That fact hung in the air between us. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for yelling that day." "For the yelling," I repeated in my head. Not for the planning, not for the spreadsheet, not for the entitlement. But it was something. I nodded. "I accept your apology for my own peace, not because the wound fully closed." There was a distance between us now, like a crack in a plate glued back together. It might still hold tea, but you'd see the line every time you looked at it. I learned to cook smaller portions just for myself, to buy flowers and put them in a jar on the table even if no one else would see them, to sit on my balcony with a cup of tea and watch the sun sink behind the buildings, not listening for anyone's footsteps, not waiting for the sound of a key.
On some nights, memories ambushed me. The sound of my son's baby laugh, his small hand clinging to my sari as we crossed the road, the look on his face when he first saw his school report card. I would feel a rush of grief like I'd lost him twice, once to adulthood and once to greed. But then I would remind myself, loving someone does not mean surrendering your life to them. Love without respect is not love, it's exploitation wearing a sentimental mask. Emotional justice didn't arrive with grand gestures. He didn't fall to his knees. His in-laws didn't come to apologize. There were no dramatic scenes. Justice came in quiet ways, in waking up in a place that was truly mine, in knowing my future was not for sale, in feeling my dignity sit beside me at the table like an old friend I had finally invited back. I realized that revenge, for a woman like me, was not about destroying their lives. It was about refusing to let them keep destroying mine. The greatest justice was this. I had reclaimed the narrative of my final decades. I was no longer the helpless old woman in their story, holding them back from modern dreams. I was the author of my own ending. And now, as I sit at my little table, the evening light spilling over my hands, I think about how easily an old woman's life can be reduced to a number in someone else's plan. That money was for my in-laws' penthouse, my son had screamed. I hear it now, and it doesn't pierce me like it did. It sounds instead like a confession, not of what I did wrong, but of who he had become, and who I chose not to be. This story is not about me being greedy. It's not about punishment for the sake of revenge. It's about a woman who poured decades of her strength, youth, and health into her family, only to realize that if she didn't protect herself at the end, no one else would. I picture other grandmothers listening to me right now. Maybe you're in a dim kitchen, the countertop chipped at the edges. Maybe you're on a worn-out sofa, springs poking at your back. Maybe you're watching this on your phone with the volume low so no one hears. I want to lean through this screen, through this camera, through this speaker, and whisper into your ear. Your age is not a weakness. It is proof. Proof that you have survived everything life has thrown at you. The lines on my hands are not reasons to step aside. They are maps of every road I walked. Roads with children on my hip, grocery bags cutting into my fingers, worries sitting heavy on my shoulders. Those lines are not shame, they are evidence. If your children speak to you as if they are a problem to be solved, not a person to be cherished, hear me clearly. Their disrespect does not erase your worth. It reveals theirs.
If anyone treats your home, your savings, your body, your time as something they can rearrange without asking you, remember, you are not a piece of furniture in their future. You are the one who built the room. I'm not telling you to hate your children. I'm not telling you to cut them off. I'm telling you to love yourself loud enough that you don't disappear in their shadow. Ask questions. Get informed. Don't let complicated words scare you into silence. Take notes in a little notebook if you have to. Go to someone who will explain your options slowly, kindly, without rolling their eyes. Do not feel ashamed for protecting what you and your partner worked a lifetime for. You are not being selfish. You are honoring the years you cannot get back. If my story makes your heart ache because it feels too familiar, know this: you are not alone. There are many of us, quiet warriors with gray hair and tired eyes, scattered in small apartments and old houses, learning slowly that our lives still belong to us. And if you are a son or a daughter listening to this, hear the tremor in my voice and understand something simple. Your parents' sacrifice is not your entitlement. It is a gift. It does not give you a lifetime subscription to their assets, their home, or their body. I chose my dignity over their penthouse. I chose my peace over their status. And if I had to do it again, knowing it might cost me the illusion of being taken care of by my own child, I would still choose the same. If you are a grandmother or a mother watching this, and you feel that old, familiar sting of betrayal in your chest, let my story be a small push. Stand up for yourself. Even if your knees shake when you do, stand anyway. I may be over 60, my hair may be thinner now, my hands may tremble when I pour tea, but when I signed those papers to protect my future, I felt stronger than I did at 20. Your story is not over just because there are more years behind you than in front of you. The last chapters can hold the most power if you write them with honesty and courage. If my voice reached you today, if my journey gave you even a little strength or opened your eyes, don't walk away quietly. Stay with me. Listen to more stories like this so you remember you are not invisible. Share this with someone who needs to hear it: a grandmother, a mother, even a son who thinks it's just a house. Let it be a mirror, a warning, a comfort. From one grandmother's heart to another, you are worth more than any penthouse, any bank account, any plan that erases your name. And as long as I still have breath in me, no one will ever again write "leftover" next to my life.